4020 Newscast.
Good afternoon and welcome along to the 4020 Newscast. It is Friday the 24th of July. I'm Tom Coates. I'm joined by Tom Alderson. We are the co-founders of 4020 News, here to bring you a look back at the week's biggest news stories. And we'll get straight into it with the story that we have to say has dominated the agenda this past few days and this past week. And that's the Toronto Saga, which has really rolled on. We've had developments with the David Argyle announcement of trying to sell shares to safeguard the future of the club, wanting a cut of the TV money. They've been pitching to Super League to save their status. Their results have been expunged from the table. We've had the speculation, the heavy speculation that Sonny Bill Williams is heading back to Sydney Roosters. Obviously, a number of Wolfpack players now being offered to other clubs, including several signings they'd made for next season. What do you make, Tom, of what we've learned during the last few days?
Well, first and foremost, the Toronto are in an extremely disappointing position, and they're obviously in a very precarious position in terms of not only their immediate future but their long-term future. Obviously, we got the announcement on Tuesday, the bombshell that they'll be pulling out of the Super League competition, and the fallout from that, as you said, has been pretty much non-stop as a narrative in rugby league. There's been rumours galore about players leaving. Sonny Bill Williams, reports from the Australian media by the sounds of it that a deal for him to return to the Roosters is going to be done within the next few hours. And it doesn't sound like he's going to be the only person going out the door. We've had Callum Watkins reportedly offered to other clubs without having played a game, and there was reports of Richie Myler, Stevie Ward and Ben Flower that were all reportedly going to join the Wolfpack, as you'd mentioned earlier. Where to now for them? The big thing remains, and it all hinges, I believe, on whether or not what the Super League clubs decide to do and decide on Toronto's fate. Will they club together to show them support and allow them to compete in Super League next year, or if there's an ultimate penalty which would see them drop down a division or maybe two divisions for sort of reneging on their terms of participating in the 2020 season, then I wouldn't be surprised if that could spell the end of the Wolfpack as we know it. I don't really see how they'd recover from that, but that remains to be seen. It's just wholeheartedly disappointing from a fan's point of view, and from obviously the Toronto fans and the fans that they've built up over the last 4 seasons, but as fans of rugby league as well, from the outside looking in, it does damage the integrity of the Super League competition, and it's obviously divided rugby league circles, hasn't it? With a number of people sympathising with them about the sort of lack of, not deliberate lack of support, but the schemes that they've not been able to have access to. They haven't been able to furlough any players. They haven't had any cut of the TV money, but then the counter argument to that from other clubs is that was a prerequisite that they agreed to before joining the competition. So it's very difficult to sort of side one way or the other. But what certainly, what we are certain of is that it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens from now. And Super League, in my opinion, Toronto rather have to have the Super League club save them, I think, for the club to continue. Otherwise, I think it's going to be very, very dark days for the clubs, and we could see a mass exodus from the Toronto playing squad if they get dropped from Super League for 2021.
Yeah. It's interesting what you say about the potential for demotion. There were some encouraging words from Bob Hunter, the Toronto chairman and CEO, who suggested that whilst they're very keen to stay in Super League, they would crack on if they were demoted to the Championship and assemble a squad capable of getting back to Super League, which was encouraging. And, it's interesting there what you mentioned about the TV share. And there's some comments from Neil Hudgell, the Hull KR owner, who's been very outspoken about Toronto really going back to when they were first promoted and the sort of clamber to get them promoted and to get them elevated into Super League. He's addressed the TV issue and the fact that Toronto now want to share, in saying that Toronto said at the very start they didn't need a TV share because they were confident of sealing a lucrative TV deal in America or in Canada, in North America. So obviously that hasn't come to pass, and now things have changed and they are keen to get that central funding. So yeah, we'll see how that progresses. On a related note, one of the clubs that has also been quite outspoken amid the Toronto fallout and amid the championship cancellation at Featherstone. Plenty of noise coming out of them this week. They now seem to be contemplating their participation in the Challenge Cup. They were due to play Wakefield in the 6th round. Although they do still want to play in Super League, it seems. They say it's unfair that Wakefield will have played matches and obviously have returned to their training schedules, whereas Featherstone won't have. Do you think they have a case, Tom?
Yeah, I think on this occasion you probably have to say they do. Like you say, that they've been, as a club, they've been very outspoken alongside Lee Centurions. In the build up to the announcement that the Championship and League One seasons would be cancelled, we've sort of debated the idea that the cancellation or the potential cancellation of the lower division seasons would have different impacts on different clubs. It seems like the vast majority of clubs that perhaps aren't realistically pushing their case for promotion are quite happy with the decisions from a financial point of view, whereas certainly Featherstone have been very outspoken, as you said, about the impact that this is going to have on them. They've openly admitted that they'd geared their roster up for a real push for promotion this year, having gone so close last year. And in terms of the logistical point of it, they're now then expected to participate in the Challenge Cup for a one-off game. I can see why they've got some frustrations with that. And in terms of talking about the logistics and the even contest of it, I think they do have a case. Wakefield are already, who they're due to play, are already back in training. They'll have played 2 Super League games, like you say, whereas the Featherstone squad, with this cancellation of the season, are kind of just having to sit on their hands really until it's safe for them to return to training, or until details of this potential autumn cup competition, winter cup competition comes through. So I do think that the odds will be heavily stacked in Wakefield's favour. And while you're talking about player welfare, which is the ultimate thing that we've been looking to establish and look after, you'd have to argue that it wouldn't be in the players' best interest, certainly from Featherstone's point of view, to go back into a competitive game against Wakefield 2 games back into their season when they haven't played or perhaps even trained hypothetically for nearly 6 months. So I think they do have a case in that one, but it will be interesting to see whether they decide to go ahead with that fixture or whether they do pull out and then let Wakefield have a free ride to the quarterfinals.
Yeah, there are a number of Championship League One clubs still in the hat. Newcastle are another one. Ironically, they were due to face Toronto, and that clearly now will not happen. So it'll be interesting to see how this all develops and what the 6th round draw looks like in practice, and whether or not there may be some buys on the cards or even a new draw if there are a significant number of clubs unable to compete. Sticking with Wakefield, though, we mentioned on Tuesday Liam Kay signing for them, a nice piece of business from Toronto. Since then, they've tied down Lee Kershaw, the winger, and they've added Tony Gigo, the former Catalans fullback, and another ex-Toronto player with them on a trial basis earlier this season. Now, you add those guys to the likes of Tom Johnston and Bill Tupou already at Wakefield. That's starting to look like one impressive attacking backs division, isn't it?
It certainly is. People who've watched Super League for a long time will know the attacking prowess and qualities of Tony Gigo. He's been there, won the Landstod Trophy in the 2018 Challenge Cup final with Catalans, of course, seasoned French international. Recently come off a trial at Toronto where in the very small handful of games he played, he looked fairly handy. Obviously, that hasn't worked out with what's going on at Toronto. So I think that's a really smart pickup for Wakefield, especially just given the fact that earlier in the season they were struck by a few issues and injuries with their outside backs. Ben Jones-Bishop, of course, hasn't played a game this year. Tom Johnston coming back from a serious ACL injury. So it adds some good quality and depth there with some real competition for places. And Lee Kershaw, played a handful of games last year. Chris Chester gave him his debut, and from what I saw, looked a very handy and very enthusiastic young player. Plenty of power and speed out wide, and it's good that he's seen the merits of committing his future to that club. You quite often see historically in circles like that unfortunately clubs like Wakefield tend to lose some of their best young kids, but we've certainly seen over the recent seasons that sort of habit's tending to reverse, and it's a very good piece of business twofold for Wakefield. And like you say, it does really show some quality signs and a really, really strong Super League outside back roster there.
Definitely. Some more new signings, not announced yet, but in the offing it seems, and it's some exclusive news we've brought you this week on 4020 News, courtesy of our reporter John Davidson. and that is Ottawa seemingly in for Halifax's Tom Gilmore, Workington's Dec O'Donnell, alongside previous reported interest in Louis Jouffre, the Featherstone halfback. So while Toronto seems a bit of a doom and gloom scenario at the moment with a lot of uncertainty, it's perhaps encouraging to see something positive elsewhere in Canada.
100%. I think, with like you say, with all of these dark days surrounding the Toronto club, and all of the bad news to come out of that, that there's some signs of light coming from Ottawa. And of course, there'll be plenty of people in the rugby league community that will be sort of rubbing their hands together and waiting for this club to fail and saying, "Look what's happened to Toronto. Why are we bothering with this?" But the Eric Perez is a bit of a visionary. They're determined to, as he's said before, learn lessons from things that they perhaps got wrong at Toronto in the early stages, and are going about things slightly differently and maybe perhaps a little bit more patiently in terms of their recruitment. It was interesting to read an article in the Mirror from John Wilkin earlier this week, a current Toronto player, who said, had openly admitted that the club had stated they got their recruitment drastically wrong in their earlier seasons and were spending far too much on players. So perhaps with some of these names that there are perhaps not the big star names and not names that are overreaching for the level that they'll be playing at. These names, of course, Championship and League One players. Perhaps they're going to put together a squad that's within their limits that they can then add to slowly and build on. And just overall, it's just good news that there's going to be something building again in North America. By no means have we written Toronto off, but it's nice to have a positive story of Ottawa piecing together their first squad for what could be a really exciting first season in League One. So all the best to them.
Yeah, I remember Toronto's initial recruitment when they were first established, and it was crazy. Just the sheer number of players they were bringing in. Obviously, we had Paul Rowley as head coach, and he seemed to sign a really good number of players to come along with him from Lee Centurions. But I remember seeing the squad and just considering they had 5 to 10 players, not even making the 17, who'd walk into most championship sides. So, whilst it's always nice to have that strength in depth, I'm not surprised to see a little bit of reflection, especially in the early years of a club, to sort of maybe rein that in a little bit. But even having said that, you look at the quality of players like Louis Jouffre and Tom Gilmore and Dec O'Donnell, very highly rated, certainly of the calibre to challenge at the top of League One. So as you say, we'll see how that progresses. But, as expansionists and as rugby league supporters, we wish that project the best. Last of all, in a very busy week, it would be remiss of us not to mention the World Cup fixtures announcement at the start of the week on Monday. This obviously happened against the backdrop of the cancellation of the championship season and the withdrawal of Toronto from Super League. So a very difficult climate to be announcing your fixtures. I joined a press call on Microsoft Teams on Monday morning with a few members of the media, and we spoke to the World Cup chief executive, John Dutton, who, as usual, was in great form, answered every question put to him, and really succeeded in creating a positive buzz. It's a packed schedule, games almost every single day, which I was particularly glad to see. What are your hopes, Tom, for the tournament next year?
Well, I think, as any rugby league fan will be hoping in the UK, that this tournament really helps put rugby league on the map in the Northern Hemisphere. We talk all the time about the battle that the sport has competing with other major sports, not more notably football, of course, in the UK and rugby union. It's no secret that the international product in rugby league just really pales in comparison to those other sports. It doesn't really have too much of a strong international platform. But the way that John Dutton and his team have gone about, organising this tournament, having the three pillars, the men's, the women's and the wheelchair all happening at the same time, gives it that extra bit of impact. And like you say, an absolutely packed schedule full of great games. I think it's 61 games across the whole tournament. And, looking at the group stages, I think there's only 4 days where there isn't a game on. So every rugby league fan, and even people who perhaps aren't fans of rugby league, they've got downtime during the middle of the week, are going to have a chance to see some competitive competitive international rugby league. And I really like what they've been doing in terms of, we talk all the time about rugby league not helping themselves in terms of being well enough organised in advance, but these fixtures are out well in advance, well over a year before the tournament. Everything's in place now. Tickets will be available, I think, from September. there's no chance, there's no reason, why we can't get huge crowds to the majority of these games and sell out, the vast majority of these games and really make a statement and take a huge step forward, I hope, for international rugby league and get it up where, I personally believe it belongs.
Definitely. Really important milestone, the release of the fixtures. It puts a bit of flesh on the bone, and I'd really encourage, fans of the sport and advocates of the tournament, speak to your friends, speak to your family. Let's generate some interest. As you mentioned, tickets going on sale is the next big milestone. And there are 3 tiers. There's 3 parts to the process. So there's a priority sales period if you sign up early. There's a ticket ballot that follows that. And then there's general sale in the new year. So get on the official website, get up to speed with the dates and get circling dates in the diary and bring friends and family along. It's a huge opportunity for our sport, as the last one was. So let's really make the most of it. Before we leave, just a few other items we'd like to cover off that have developed from this week. Yesterday, there was the announcement from League Weekly that they won't be returning to publication this season. Very sad news. The suspended publication around the time that the season was stopped due to coronavirus. We hope to see them back next year as one of the major trade newspapers covering our sport. Earlier today, we brought you the news of Gareth Keir, the Wales CEO, has joined a working party alongside Cardiff City Council to honour some of the Wales pioneers of yesteryear who've really helped blaze a trail for rugby league. And that includes Roy Francis, who Phil Kaplan wrote so passionately about. So fantastic to see that. There could be some recognition on the way for those players. And then just last of all, I'd like to give a mention to the virtual Smudger Under-7s. This is a junior tournament organised by the Nick Smith Foundation. This is the charity established in memory of the former Siddle and Leeds Academy player. The Smudger Under-7s takes place every year, and it's a fantastic tournament for young players, all about providing playing opportunities to young players. Obviously, with the restrictions this year, changes have had to be made, so it's a virtual tournament. There are still plenty of ways to get involved. We'll put the address, if you're listening on the website, the address will be above this audio clip. But you can visit smudgeru7s.com. That's smudgeru7s.com or nicksmithfoundation.org.uk. Please check it out and give them your support. But that'll do it for our latest 4020 newscast. We'd like to thank you for listening. As always, for magazine content added daily and for the latest news, check out 4020.news.
4020 Newscast.